아니 tamshe nange ani Professor Kværne Norway neje 콩 유럽 나라 버르바 신주 지행게 코란도 뒤서 나라 로순주 소주 그토라 아니 풀 프로페서십 라겐텐데 게도 첨보리 제제 첨보리 데네 베발레 차네 로니숨 그 제네 아니 베바든 제바 예바 아니 베발레 겹소 그 로바 지행게 레제나는 제바 흉 첨보 예바던데 베발 뺀마시 제바 히부 유딩이지 자디요지 데네 내가 채와 찍 가리어서 나간도 둔주 덩군의 송제 다 당부 둔주 던든 로라 양 테베로로지스는 지기 총도 소요리 주릭라 디두 아니 총도 디나로 코나 페요리 아니 둔주 덩군의 송제 아니 International Association of Tibetan Studies 요리 디나라 냠슈나 요레라 아니 디 애소시에이션 속바 되게 중재 나뇨 요레 코나 다가 너신 급주 공리 글로라 아니 제지퍼리 소제 땅에 당가데 쟁기면도 급주 공리로도 소제데 아니 자직 아니 프로페서 페르 나은제 간조 노르웨게 파르가나스게 텔 아니 총도 소요레 대상마 고직 공부도스나 요레 지도 버르바 그 신주 가서 찌그 간을 냥시 제요레 아니 양고 믹스에 그런 게 체주 믹스에 가리간 도나 제요스 아니 범보가 간을 병가 간을 도나 제요레 다니 로시주 샤두 마심세 지그랭가 아니 병샤다 그 꼴라 냥시 제요레 근데 냥시 제단 대요 지제게 케바 지제게 럽주 근데 망보 카지 버버게 버르비 힘주 지도자네 아니 베데 버번냠도 베 이모셔널 차 야문에 지금 베 닝말 가고 싶어차 영문에 까줄 가고 싶어차 영문에 라살 가고 차 근데 지금 근데 요래 지도자네 디릭디기 좀 지도자네 참래 이모셔널 체탁제 양강에 요래 지도자네 subject 잠자도 좀씩 된도 정말 이모셔널 자원이네 만제베 톤에 아니 힘죽 제겐지 하는 건도 프로페서 두스 차도 요리 데네 겨주 저굴라 아니 여러분 부채라 데네 노베히 데생다 또 톱요리 디 톱에 카두 된돌라 디녜네 로순주 소동이 녜네 노베히 데생다 아니 여러분 부채 톱에 된돌라 슉자베 링귀지에 되도나는 들어요리 코나 찍니디 데네다 내가 체슈지 가리어스나 아니 오슬로 유니버시티 콩그 찰레 농사라 버네 최가 숨네 단다 바두 PhD 중에 미정가 수치 MPhil 중에 미자스치 버바부고 군도들 소정체요래 때 가르스나 다니로 주스 주정에 녜스네 녜마이나 아니 번절라다 치모이나 다다 라다 치모 가사칼 버바게 기긴트조 아니 디그리 디 이퀴벌런트 단디 비 가소레 PhD 낭신게 개발 요래 그런 기시땅 요래 딘데 소리 람네 레가라고 요래 다 뒤치 야미 기더니 예직은 로다노 제제더니 BA MA PhD 치 딘데 제나마도 라도 첨몰라더니 레가라고 요마 딘데 마라드 아는 건저 베베기 드니 가소르 개바동 아니 로마 딘도 소종 제제 아니 MA 소에 PhD 소에 딘디칸로 코나도 시라슈 침부자요. 베나 탈롱은도 진짜 두발라 노르웨이 두두자네 버바가 포포모 PhD 제딩에 듄스 징도 암돈도 의존도 감는도 딘디지 소종 슉 침부 나요. 딘에 나 게르긴다고 차가는 건도 겨주 경인이 제건도 모싱긴 그 조분님 바지 답로님 바지 데네 니도 책 가리어스나 페나 노르웨기 제보도 주문이 두글레 페야소로고 야만에 바유레 페야소로고 야만에 자갈레 페야소로고이나 아니 프로페서 딘디 슈전 다와 둔다 찍스링가 아니 제보금 산 차단을 룸바테거든이 최 가리르 르흉 가리르 깨 가리르 곰시 가리르 최고 간지르 데네 룸바토조 나히 간지요 딘디 간을 코나달 롭든 슈 딘디 찍으리 단 도르드나 빼마시 냠뇨 여와 집제 여와 냉가 여와기 아니 개바치 차도 요래 단 다른 사람 합뱀네 로좁지세지 진짜 제제 단 로좁지 진다 다니요 양제진 다른 살페 드니 땡주 지소나는 지와 가르가르 중도 현재도 살롱 간데 중도 현재도 그 살로 동다 간den도 롭종 간den도 된도 따야다 아니 다가나시 즉 야제 가르가르 친도 친구 보고 야제 가르가르 친도 된데 따야다 아니 조분닝 박 도와 레스니 레닐 하데와도 두야다 된데 제제 다른 살다 로좁지 진도 스피그 요래 다 드니 당시에 그 시식은 저자 조데 가린세나 유럽 중립기 병기 차배 병기 빼자 깨로 첨부 개 첨부 작발링다 생지요래 디나라 아니 벽이 전부 벽이 제럽도 마셔 용도 쳐답 시 용도 해동 또서 만다가지 가르가리 예매지 디골 두스 당신 그래.
So thank you very much, Tashit Seringla, for these words of welcome. It's a long time since I've been to Dharamsala. It's actually 18 years, I just discovered the other day. So it's high time to be back here for a visit, and certainly it has changed a lot over these years. So I will sort of get straight to my topic so that I will present my topic, and then if there is if there is time, we can maybe have some discussion and questions and answers, and I'd be very interested to have your reactions, of course. And so I'll try to keep this sort of shortish. History as a field of research is not only about finding out what actually happened, but even more about trying to understand what people imagined happened. In other words, it's about understanding historical narratives. I hasten to add that this does not mean that historical narratives are necessarily created for spurious or instrumental reasons. They are usually founded on realities, albeit often quite fluid realities, on the ground. However, such narratives tend to solidify, as it were. They start living a life of their own and develop according to their inherent logic. In the case of Tibet, we are all familiar with the historical narrative of how Buddhism was introduced and how it became the dominant religion. This narrative has been successful to such an extent that in the perception of the majority of Tibetans, and one may add the general public in the West, the very word Tibet immediately brings to mind the concurrent term Buddhism. However, there also exists another narrative in Tibet, different from the official one, as set forth, for example, in foundational texts like the 12th to 13th century Manikabum. This alternative narrative arose in central Tibet, possibly as early as the 10th century, in milieu which, in the course of the following centuries, took on a distinct identity and eventually came to designate their traditions as Yungdung Bön, everlasting Bön, in contrast to Chö, Dharma, in other words, in contrast to Buddhism. This afternoon, I do not propose to discuss the complex and still unclear relationship between the phenomenon of Yungdung Bön, which arose in the 10th and 11th centuries, on the one hand, and the ritual experts, likewise styled Bön, who were an important group of priests and soothsayers in imperial Tibet. This problem is further complicated by the existence up to the present time of non-monastic ritual experts, especially in the Himalayan regions, who are also locally known as Bumpo. So, putting the question of ancient as well as Himalayan Burn priests among Tamang, etc., to one side, it should be understood that when I refer to Burn, I refer to Yungdung Burn. I would now like to present a text illustrating a non-Buddhist, or if you prefer, a non-Che narrative of Tibetan history according to Burn. It has long been known that Burn has a literary tradition of historical narratives. Among these texts is the Lekshe Dze, the Treasury of Good Sayings, written in 1922 by a well-known Burn scholar, Shardza Tashi Gyaltsen, who lived from 1859 to 1935, and published with a translation by Samten Gyaltsen Karme in London in 1972. Here, for the first time in English, was a coherent exposition of Burn during the Tibetan royal dynasty, the subsequent suppression of Burn, and its re-emergence in the form of terma, treasures or hidden texts, in the post-dynastic period. All of it seen from the point of view of Yungdung Burn. In this survey of Tibetan sources, Karma lists in his book a manuscript preserved in the Oslo University Library entitled, and I just give the short title, Grags-Pa Gling-Grags, and henceforth I will refer to it simply as the Lingdrak, a text which is repeatedly quoted by Shardza Tashi Gyaltsen. Independently of Karme, I had mentioned this text in my catalogue of the Tibetan texts in the Oslo University Library, which was published in 1973. It is this text that we shall now examine. The date of the text is, unfortunately, not known, although the French Tibetologist Anne-Marie Blondeau has convincingly argued that it probably dates from the 12th century. The following is based on my own work on this text, a work which is still in progress. But I'm happy to say it looks as if the end is in sight. Now, following the headings supplied by the text itself, it focuses on 4 topics. First, a survey of the various countries on our continent of Jambudvipa and their location with regard to Tibet. Second, the succession of enlightened teachers. Third, the origin, rise, and decline of the kings of Tibet and their priests. And fourth, prophecies regarding the fate of Burn and of Tibet. The first section, I'll just mention very briefly, has 3 main topics. First, a survey of the 18 great countries of the world and what are called the 91 minor countries, of which several are populated by prodigies, such as human-like creatures having, as it's said, having one eye on the chest, or huge ears enveloping their body. Second, locating Tibet in relation to these countries in such a way that the resulting map of Tibet has Tibet at the center. The map of the world, I mean, has got Tibet in the center. Dan Martin has discussed this geographical scheme as set out in our text. And third, a description of the holy mountain Kangtise or Kailasha in western Tibet and the nearby lake Mapang or Manasarovar. Since I shall talk about this topic on Saturday, I shall not discuss it any further now. The second section, main section, does not need to detain us here. Suffice it to say that according to this part of the text, the succession of teachers in the world ends with a final one, the coming of Tönpa Shenrap, the divine teacher of Burn. And as it is said, at the time when man's lifespan was 100 years. It is worth noting that the text further explains that in a subsequent period, but before our present time, Shenrap, in fact, taught, or here it is as a sort of prophecy, he will teach for a time Che. In other words, Buddhism, a doctrine which, according to the text, although essentially identical with Bön, will be better adapted to the spiritual capacities of that age when he will, as it is said, be born in the royal family of the Shakyas. The text then returns to the way Bön was propagated in the various countries of the world, in all 360 countries, each having a different language, as it is stated, and starting with the land of Shangshung. This culminates with a long account of how Shenrab was born as a prince of the Shakyas to ensure that Buddhism should henceforth have a firm scriptural basis, and thus several texts of Bön were transformed into Buddhist texts and propagated. This is according to the Grags-Pa Gling-Grags. That's what it has to say about this period of the coming of the various teachers. Then it goes on to the main topic. That is the origin and the history of the Tibetan royal dynasty. This is a long and complex section. First of all, the point is made that Bön was established in Tibet before the appearance of the Tibetan kings. This is followed by a rather involved myth about the coming of the first king of Tibet. It starts by describing a series of divine generations, each marking a stage in the process of descent through the levels of the sky, and gradually becoming involved with the earth below. Finally, from a goiter-like lump on the neck of their divine mother, 4 beings emerge: a scorpion, a frog, a fish, and a tadpole. Having been put in the receptacle of gold by their parents, these 4 creatures eventually turn into 4 men. The first, a man of crystal, tells the amazed parents that he is Nyatri Tsempo, that the golden man is his priest of the Yangel family, and that the last 2 are their attendants. Surrounded by this retinue, Nyatri Tsempo descends to earth, to the Yarlung Valley, by means of a magic rope and a magic ladder, the mutak and the muke. This is, of course, a variant of the myth of the descent to earth of Nyatri Tsempo, although in a complex form. A similar version is found in the Deu Chochung, which, by the way, you may know, Dan Martin has translated, and it should be published within the foreseeable future. And in fact, it's also attested in certain Dunhuang documents. Anyway, to return to our account, this introduced a list of subsequent Tibetan kings. The power and privileges of the Bön priests are always emphasized, but it is also worth noting, in view of the current focus on Shangshung by scholars as well as by non-scholars, that Shangshung is only mentioned as a region that defines the western border of the Tibetan kingdom. It has no great intrinsic importance, and it's not in any way singled out as a kind of holy land of Bön. The focus is always on Tibet. Much space is devoted to King Drigum Tsempo, said to be a demon intent on revenge, having in a previous life been liberated by a Bön priest. During the reign of Drigum Tsempo, the ministers slander Bön and the priests, and the latter, the priests, the Bonpos, understand that they are about to be expelled from the realm, and they meet to discuss the situation. The most prominent one among them, Drempa Namka, seconded by his teacher, the sage Tongyung, advises them to hide texts so that they may be propagated in the future. This is the founding story of a part of the Bön Terma tradition. What should be pointed out is that the narrative of the Gling-Grag has a specific agenda. It seeks to convince the reader that Bön has a body of authoritative texts and that these texts are far older than the coming of Buddhism to Tibet, having been hidden during the reign of Nyarti Tsempo and later rediscovered. Moreover, the Lingdrag maintains that if these Bön texts only surfaced at a time when Buddhism was in the process of gaining ground, it was because that was the time they were preordained to be rediscovered. These texts were thus hidden at various places and the Bön priests expelled. Drenpa Namkha curses the king, who accordingly dies after a short time. Subsequent kings are briefly dealt with, one of them being Hla Totori, who in the standard Buddhist narrative is supposed to have been the first Tibetan king to receive Buddhist texts from India. The Lingdrag, however, states that he only received a golden chaitya, and because someone said that this was a Buddhist object, it was later claimed, according to the Lingdrag, that the Buddhist Dharma had entered Tibet. A few generations later, we come to Namri Löntzen, who is generally recognized to be a historical figure. According to the Lingdrag, it was during his reign that Buddhist texts were brought to Tibet for the first time, including the Karanda Vyuha and the Sadharma Pundarika Sutra. The king wishes to study them, but this upsets the gods and demons of Tibet, and various calamities ensue, and consequently, as the text states, I quote, "The adherents of Buddhism were suppressed. Disease and famine thereupon disappear, and the Bön priests are honored as before." Under the name of Songtsen Detsen, Songtsen Gampo is mentioned, not under that name, but as Songtsen Detsen, but only in passing. No particular event is related to his reign. After a few more generations, we come to the crux of the entire narrative. Enter one of the two protagonists, namely King Trisong Detsen. With him, we are on firm historical ground, but the later narratives, which are supposed to help the historian find his bearings on that ground, are far from firm, as Buddhists as well as Bonpos have for many centuries had their respective axes to grind. The basic argument offered in the Lingdrag to explain why Buddhism supplanted Bön in royal favor, that's really what the whole thing is about. The basic argument is twofold. This twofold argument takes the form of two stories, one of which explains the direct cause of the decline of Bön, while the other, in a more indirect way, illustrates the basic identity of Bön and Buddhism. These are the two really basic themes of the text. Both stories hinge upon the idea that a promise, a wish, or curse, uttered with sufficient fervency, will inevitably come to fruition in a later existence. We've seen this idea already in the case of Nyarti Tsempo. Now, the first story concerns three Indian beggars who, having collected sufficient alms and consequently become rich, construct the great stupa of Chari Kashor, usually identified as Bodhnath, although some uncertainty may be, but it's of no consequence here. And this happens during the reign of King Trisong Detsen's father. At that time, this is now the Lingdrag, the story in the Lingdrag. At that time, neither China nor India was able to resist the Tibetan armies. But the wily king of China, however, suggests to the beggars that if Buddhism could be introduced into Tibet, this would weaken the country and the Tibetans would cease to attack India, the holy land of the Buddha. The beggars thereupon utter a fervent prayer that they may be reborn in Tibet in their next life and establish Buddhism in the land of snow. Consequently, they die and are reborn as King Trisong Detsen I and the Indian Buddhist masters Padmasambhava and Shantarakshita. The text does not refer to the latter, Shantarakshita, by name, but consistently refers to him as just the Bodhisattva. So now we can say the stage is set. The second story is a story within the story. It serves to reinforce the Bön claim that a particular variant of Chö, which Trisong Detsen introduced into Tibet, was not the true Buddhism of Shakyamuni. It was not the authentic Buddhism, which, as we have already noted, is said to be basically identical with Bön. On the contrary, what was introduced under Trisong Detsen was a perversion of Buddhism. It was fabricated by a demon. This line of argument could be understood as an attempt by the adherents of Yungdung Bön to make a kind of peaceful existence among religion, among Bön and Chö, but on their own terms, of course, as such efforts usually are. So, the story goes like this. From a divine origin and passing through several generations, a brother and a sister are born. They are expelled from the land of the gods. They take up residence in a cave near Varanasi, and there they practice what is referred to as a perverted doctrine, which in a general way from its description indicates a variety of so-called left-handed tantric practices. It said Vajra and bell are the ritual implements, and they wear rough yellow shawls. They copulate, and from their incestuous union, a son and a daughter are born, who in turn copulate, and the son is born. This son mixes the inherently pure Buddhism, Chö, and the evil spell of the heretics, of the Mutekpas. A religious war follows, and in the course of this, the Buddhists, that is, the real Buddhists, the true Buddhists, the followers of Shakyamuni, are conquered and almost destroyed by the Mutekpas. So the Buddhists accordingly appeal to the Tibetan king, who at the time is an upholder of Bön, who intervenes with his army, vanquishes the heretics, and restores Chö in India. Now this story, the author of the Lingdrak must surely have felt that this story ought to give his contemporary Buddhist adversaries food for thought. Be that as it may, and returning to the main story, the situation in Tibet at the beginning of Trisong Detsen's reign is described as one of peace, prosperity, and serenity. And quote just a short passage. The kings had great dominion, the ministers were great in counsel, the priests had great magic skill. However, this happy state of affairs is not fated to last. Drempa Namka, who now emerges as the real hero of the story, has an ominous dream. In his dream, he sees a revolting figure who says that he is, quote, a supernatural emanation practicing Buddhism in the land of India. Obviously, the perverted Buddhism, because he wears saffron robes, rides a horse, holds a vajra, clasps a golden dagger to his side, has a rosary made of human finger joints, and a skull as his cup, pouring out libations of human blood and horse's blood. This is an omen of the impending destruction of Bön. The text then adds laconically, then, quote, then after a few years, Padmasambhava and Bodhisattva came to Tibet just as Drempa had dreamt. The two Indians, having come to Tibet, they easily succeed in bringing the king round to supporting Buddhism, although the ministers refuse to follow suit. Everything according to the Ling-Drag. Trungpa Kye, one of the ministers, tries to reason with the king, but to no avail. In his reply to the minister, the king admits that he has no interest in Bön and discloses his real motive for following the teachers of Padmasambhava. And I quote, the king says, "The king of India is said to have lived 1,000 years because he practiced this doctrine. I require it in order to likewise prolong my life. Even if I die, I do not require the funeral rites of Bön, for it is said that by uttering a single prayer, one is reborn as a god. So now I shall practice Buddhism." According to the Ling-Drag, the consequences were soon felt, and the Tibetan Empire suffered revolts and military setbacks. It was now the turn of Buddhism to be suppressed, and Tibetan ministers personally returned Buddhist texts to India and Nepal to be sure to get rid of them, while other texts were placed under stupas. And I quote, "A law was proclaimed that Buddhism was not to be practiced, and spies were appointed. Padmasambhava and Bodhisattva returned to India, being unable to put up with the derision of the ordinary people of Tibet, the mocking of the ordinary people." So for Tibet, military success and territorial expansion soon followed after this expulsion of the Buddhists. Long lists of conquests and honors heaped on the Bön priests are provided. And all would seem to be well once more. Nevertheless, the king once again invites Padmasambhava and Bodhisattva to Tibet. And in addition to that, the king builds a temple at Samye, and Tibetans are ordained as Buddhist monks. The picture which is painted of Buddhist monks and their followers is not particularly appealing in the Ling-Drag, and I quote, "Male and female beggars, widows and widowers, men and women without offspring, lepers and polluted people, all were taught the Buddhist precepts." Now, once Samye had been built and monks ordained, the king ordered a contest to be arranged between the Buddhist monks and the Bön priests to decide who had the strongest magic power and the strongest supernatural force, Tu and Chinlap. Both sides choose their spokesman, and 2 neutral judges were appointed, and the king himself presided. The contest was curious, but potentially lethal. The king ordered the Bön priests to attempt to kill one of the spokesmen of Buddhism, namely Chim Shakya-Draba, by means of magic, while Padmasambhava was ordered to prevent this happening by using his magic. The Bön priests, however, were more powerful, so Shakya-Draba died. The king asked Padmasambhava how this could have come about, and the latter somewhat lamely explained that as Shakya-Draba had no further span of life, his life was spent and it was time to die. The king now challenges the Bön priests to bring Shakya-Draba back to life, which they promptly do. The king thereupon orders the 2 parties to repeat the performance but reversing the roles. However, Padmasambhava could not even make the spokesman of Bön fall asleep, much less die. The king asks him why this is so, and once again the latter comes up with a curious explanation. He says, "In a previous life, this one was born as an ox, therefore magic cannot harm him. By way of proof, he hits his victim's head with a stick, and the sound cock cock, as if striking a horn, is heard. However, when his head is hit by a burn priest, no sound is heard. Although the inhabitants of Tibet, or so the text maintains, preferred burn after this debate and attempted to suppress Buddhism, the power of the previous acts of the three beggars secures the survival of the Buddhist Indian religion. The king now retires to a secluded spot and for a year practices rituals involving various impure substances. The result, as could be foreseen, is a renewed outbreak of disease all over the country. The leaders of the Buddhist party die, and the king himself becomes ill. The burn priests are therefore ordered to resume the worship of the Hwa and the Lu, and soon all is again well, but not for long. As will now become clear, the king is portrayed as someone who is of a weak and fickle personality, with a secret penchant for Buddhist tantric practices, which, as you have understood, according to our text, are not Buddhist at all. He now decides to arrange a second contest between Buddhism and burn. This time, the challenge to the burn priests is to perform the traditional funerary rituals for two of the Tibetan leaders of the Buddhist party, who had died in the course of the disease that had ensued from the king's impiety, and then bring them back to life at a set time. The burn priests, not surprisingly, are successful, and when the appointed time comes, both the dead men return, although in what way, whether through a medium that they speak through, or otherwise, the text does not say. The conclusion is that Mahjong, one of the two Buddhists who had been brought back to life, at least to the extent of being able to communicate by means of speech from his existence at the other side of the grave, Mahjong states that here in this land of the dead, he is given all kinds of food, and after that he can ascend to the happy land of the gods, this expression used. This is further elaborated on the following day when the monk Shakadraba similarly returns to life and describes the happy land of the gods. I quote, "There are good seats, gold, silver, copper, iron, and so on, various kinds of jewels and all kinds of food, horses, sheep, zo and yak, retainers and servants, and enjoyment beyond imagination." You see, this idea of the afterlife is totally unrelated to Buddhism. But this is what the actual report, including Shakadraba, who is a monk, this is what the actual report from the state of afterlife. All these elements which they enjoy, horses, sheep, zo, yak, etc., are elements which can be found today depicted on ritual cards, on tsakli, in burn mortuary rituals in our own times and in exile, as well as in Tibet itself and along the Himalayan areas. However, the Buddhist party now makes a final and this time successful attempt at getting the upper hand. Through their supernatural powers, however, the burn priests read the king's thoughts, so before he can actually act, some of them fly off into the sky, others retreat to slate mountains and snowy cliffs. Drempa Namka, the leader, however, goes to the king, who gives him the choice between subjecting himself to Buddhism or suffering the penalty of death. Drempa Namka, stating, and I quote, "Just as there is neither near nor far, neither poison nor medicine, there is no difference between Buddhism and burn. However," he says, "as refusing the order of the king would be harmful to Tibet, no matter what the order is, And in order to secure the king's dominion and long life, he agrees to be ordained. He then proceeds to ordain himself, for he says, I quote, "Although the teachers of former times were ordained, they certainly were not ordained by the yellow-clad followers of Buddhism." Thus, Trengpa Namkha becomes a true Buddhist, because what is referring to is, of course, the false practitioners of Buddhism who were active, according to him, in Tibet at that time. The king, however, consents to his request that the texts of Bön should be hidden, to be extracted once more when the time would be ripe. So you see there are two sequences of texts being hidden under Drigum Temple and then again under Trisong Detsen. The text ends, and that's the fourth and final division of the text, by a very lengthy prophecy, which I shall not repeat here. It's rather depressing, in which Trengpa Namkha describes in great detail all the disasters that will now befall Tibet. The eclipse of the royal dynasty, social and political chaos, moral depravity, natural disasters, founding of Buddhist monasteries, and worst of all, having to pay taxes to the Buddhist monasteries. So this ends the narrative there. There's no Lang Dharma and so on is not mentioned at all. The anonymous author has achieved his aim of explaining in a coherent way how the present situation of the ascendancy of Buddhism in the 12th century, let's say, has come about, constructing a narrative which is the one which is largely accepted by Tibetan Bonpos, that is, followers of Yungdrung Bön, until this day. So I'll stop there, and it gives us a little time for some discussion. Thank you very much.
lungtang yo mari suji gi tunghang gi yigja lungtang yo mari dedir marbo chidong sumjang nang gi jore dinala ani jana gi jerap tangsu tang enels ne jana gi jeram ne ani bögen deba yiba kha chik teng tangbu lungtang gi yor jidudan chijela khari chigi yor bögi jerap ledudan ani jerap 셰동 만다 가천도 쿵 만다 가천도 대 참아가는 신주 속이요 먼저 변나 차가나 동화이데 수그 배줬던 요래 긴도 준비 그 지동 그제 10주나를 신에 동화 이제 되게 긴도 준비 배줬던 거 이나요 긴도 준비 그 대대 깔고 나올라 범보 룽요 말 룽상요 말 범보 배자 자원을 해 차는 것도 배우기 제럽게다 체크돼 공을 지분 시작해 봐요 그 지시하죠 됐어 벽이 쓰던 게라 지동 그자 둔주 던주로 빠르게서 이나요 지동 그자 둔주 둔이라 샤 죽주나를 지샤버게 아니 반대 수좀 세제 범부가 개바 할래지 중요요 콩그 잠베게 범부가 준중이 나다 콩그 잠베게 벽이 준중 갈수 남바가 준중이 되게 잡아닌 샤가바가 룽제 정요 말이 땡원도 배바라는 그 로주 듣더니 곰시드 가리었으나 두시에 상은 두시에 된다는 가르는 봐. 인지 민지 남바 디게도 최바 디게도 최바 랑 넘버 랑 룽탄다마도 현다들 따로 쓰고요 말. 가릴람도 만다와 가린도 셰동 만다와 가린도 춘네 가르소를 된다에 그 곰시요 말. 단데 버바가 지소 나라 곰시 당보디 미 채와 노시 속에 소리 남게 노로 좀 붙이지. 저동 그자 든지 되니네 송제 당보 수스기 버바기 슈누 속발라 되니 버그 루지시로 치스도네 아니 범보그 루지를 때제 게데 먼저 그 루지데 버그 시빌리제이션다 버그 루지데 김제 자가르동 자나동 바유다 두두다 찍바지 요구고요나 아니 먼저 루지데 님바 고고요레 단단 먼저 그 따데 루지를 때나르바 야가도 야나 참마 미차 셰여 여바차 링네 여바차도 너도 단대 비우진 대디요. 따딘 드금만두스 주단 힘제 계급 참마 되니 가서 우리 링네 쟁게 아니 가서 지소데 차도 너도 다도 비우 야만나 라로진 대요. 로바진 대디요. 된 드금만두스 따딘 드금만한테 카섭디 카군데 가르치군도 때 가봤다 그거잖아. 안타 범부 이자다 그군두스 진 아니 rumbochi 범부 이자 딴 this 소나요다 당부대 번에 시 창와세디 수스기 벽이 휴는 속바존나 렉자히에버기 신디트리 다 되게 제네 아니 담노부 도시에서도 디스요에서도 다 rumbochi 차다 망보잠요 당원들 강에요 베바세지들바 파도 탱기 첨보리 아니 초신 첨보리 드님도자는 망보지기 라버도 닝마 망보지기라 남근 노부선 보치세지도 범보 인사래서 쿵 가바도네 범보 샤달 쿵또 인고도 그 범보 두자데 인사래 드니시고 럼보지 범보 말이 오네지나 파일 유두산 범보 빼자 통이 유지 말이 오네지나 다 이탈리라 프로페서 투지기 롬라 프로페서 투지기 벤조칸라 이스메오스 대니 힘주 제베 코들 아니 범보 빼자 빼 몸보요 된도 정말 럼보지가 까치아스 제임두자니 로지 셰동 만다와 두경안도 그 셰동도 만다와 아니 딘딘 두스제제 니기요 다 다른 게 빼나 차야나 프로페서 페르라기 범부 빼자 두럽 중에 임바 작바 링다 세지테노라 셰동 두경안도 그 셰동도 싸워니는 데고요 말 단데 내 약보리 내 두자리 내 궁요리 내 궁메리 디까지 시기요 말고 내라트 만다와 세지테 체동 셰동 만다와 지금 드니신 누세디 따당도 보디 내가 저당도 보디 딘데 차고요 다 등상 다 남근 누부름 붙이 그 범복이 쿵디게 쿵탕고요 근데 전에 그 동한동 아니 당수산님 그 이자도 쿵다 다 등상 로럽 야주 굽주노 별로 여되게 개바 처음하게 다 차장 루진 범복이 이자를 차장 따지고 것도 살게요 탱ger다 초심 매백 토네 로주데 영타바다 로주데 쿵sem보다 로주데 70 가지 잡투근도 롱가동 닝게자 시에투근도 문도 두동 닝게자 시에투근도 문도 아니 김세 자가도 야나도 바유도 딘도단 다베게티니 civilization 페이언도 리네 여바징도 지소도 듭투근도 문도 됐다니르바 아니 인지케자면 아이덴티티 서버지 체기요 덴데소도 아니 내가 유주대 된데다 지지 등은 돔러부 된데 다 되게 재능한도 변족한 게 중재 공하이실라 두지 체슈직 순거 있습니다.
뭐 도마데 프로페서 베르라 먼저다가 암내마전 게리 쇼 되네 간다 먼저 변지 기념으로 제제 다르기 레시 내가 다 담시시 시로시에서 코란게니 시시나서 코란에 제든 겨울에 엔들 니마시라 쉬에 요사마레 제단된 디직낸 같이 지시 코란 델페 담시 야부시란 중요래 당아서 안케나스 넘버에 망고시 펜요래 선거도 디 나주기 가서 그래 베베기 다 겨러 루교디 베 가서 그래 다 인지게 무슨에 다 컴플렉스 쇼시도 그 고용고 쉬우시도 안 다리한테 롭중 싸워지 신송하라이네 신송은 캐나무세 페이지 되는 방법이 싸워 퇴열의 상고도 예 제가 하는 거지 변제 간다 단다 거서 아무나 맞아 이 리슈데 내가 교차시 되는 아주 대 평행 상맥의 잡시 이제 요거랑 토지나 쉬이